The silent progression of cognitive decline is often mistakenly accepted as an inevitable consequence of the passing years. This fatalistic view ignores the profound impact that daily nutritional choices have on the delicate neural networks that sustain memory and clarity. A pervasive culture of convenience and automatic consumption obscures the reality that specific, common dietary staples actively erode brain health, accelerating aging processes that could otherwise be slowed or managed. By bringing a quality of non-judgmental awareness to these dietary habits, the individual can reclaim agency over their long-term cognitive vitality. A shift from mindless ingestion to conscious nourishment offers a clear path toward preserving the sharpness of the mind well into the later decades of life. The deceptive sweetness of liquid and solid sugars, the pervasive presence of refined sugars in the modern diet represents one of the most immediate threats to cognitive integrity. When the body is inundated with high concentrations of glucose and fructose, the metabolic machinery struggles to maintain equilibrium, leading to a state of chronic insulin resistance. This condition, often described by researchers as type 3 diabetes, specifically targets the brain, impairing the hippocampus's ability to form and retrieve memories. The mechanism is insidious. As insulin receptors in the brain become less sensitive, neurons are deprived of the glucose they require for energy, leading to cellular starvation and eventual atrophy. John Kabat-Zinn's approach to mindfulness suggests that the first step in countering this biological assault is simply noticing the impulse to consume sweetness without immediate reaction. The physiological cascade triggered by excessive sugar intake extends beyond simple energy disruption. High blood sugar levels promote the formation of advanced glycation end products, sticky proteins that gum up the neural pathways and trigger widespread inflammation. This inflammation acts as a persistent alarm signal within the central nervous system, distracting the brain's repair mechanisms and diverting resources away from maintenance tasks. The individual who consumes sugary beverages or treats on automatic pilot often misses the subtle signals of the body reacting to this inflammatory spike, the brief rush followed by the mental fog and fatigue. Recognizing these physical sensations as they arise creates a gap between the craving and the action, allowing wisdom to intervene before the cycle of damage repeats. In an applied scenario, one might consider the common mid-afternoon slump that typically leads to the office vending machine or the pantry. The hand reaches for a soda or a candy bar not out of true hunger, but out of a conditioned response to stress or boredom. The sugar provides a fleeting lift, but biologically, it is initiating a spike in blood glucose that will crash within the hour, leaving the brain more depleted than before. By pausing for a moment to observe the sensation of fatigue without judging it or immediately trying to fix it with sugar, the person opens the door to alternative responses, such as hydration or a brief walk. This moment of pause is where the trajectory of brain health is altered, one decision at a time. However, it is crucial to understand that not all carbohydrates act with such destructive force. The problem lies specifically with isolated, concentrated sugars that lack the fiber matrix found in whole fruits. Nature packages fructose with fiber, which slows absorption and mitigates the insulin spike, providing a steady stream of energy rather than a damaging flood. The counterexample here is the consumption of a whole apple versus a glass of apple juice. The former supports health through gradual release, while the latter mimics the metabolic impact of a soft drink. It is the refining process, stripping away the natural context of a nutrient, that turns a source of energy into a source of neural degeneration. The impact of sugar is further compounded when it becomes a tool for emotional regulation. Many individuals unconsciously use sweet foods to soothe anxiety or mask discomfort, creating a psychological dependency that reinforces the biological damage. This creates a dual-layered trap: the physiological addiction to the glucose spike and the emotional reliance on the temporary comfort it provides. Breaking this cycle requires a compassionate acknowledgement of the emotional state driving the craving, instead of harsh self-criticism, which only fuels further stress and craving. The individual can cultivate a gentle curiosity about the feelings arising in the present moment, diminishing the power of the sugar to act as a crutch. As the brain becomes liberated from the constant oscillation of sugar highs and lows, cognitive clarity often begins to return. The fog that once seemed like a permanent feature of aging reveals itself to be a transient state induced by dietary stress. This realization can be empowering, shifting the narrative from one of helpless decline to one of active stewardship. The neural pathways, given a respite from the inflammatory onslaught, can begin the slow work of repair and regeneration. This recovery process is not instantaneous, but is supported by every instance of mindful restraint and conscious selection. The journey away from refined sugars is not about rigid deprivation, but about reconnecting with the authentic needs of the body. It involves learning to distinguish between the loud, urgent voice of addiction and the quiet, steady signal of genuine hunger. When the individual learns to inhabit their body fully, the appeal of hyperpalatable, sugary foods naturally diminishes, replaced by a preference for nourishment that sustains rather than depletes. In this space of awareness, the brain is protected not by willpower alone, but by a deep, intuitive understanding of what serves its highest function. What am I feeding my mind when I eat without looking? The rigid influence of industrial trans fats, the introduction of industrial trans fats into the food supply, brought a shelf-stable convenience that came at a staggering biological cost. These artificial fats, created by pumping hydrogen into vegetable oils, integrate themselves into the very cell membranes of neurons, replacing the flexible, natural fats that are essential for efficient cellular communication. A neuron's membrane must remain fluid and permeable to transmit signals effectively. When trans fats are incorporated, the membrane becomes rigid and dysfunctional. This cellular hardening slows down neural processing speed and compromises the brain's ability to protect itself from toxic byproducts, effectively accelerating the structural aging of the brain. The damage caused by trans fats is not limited to the cellular membrane. It extends to the vascular system that supplies the brain with oxygen and nutrients. These fats are potent drivers of systemic inflammation and are known to raise levels of LDL cholesterol while lowering the protective HDL cholesterol. This imbalance promotes the development of atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries. When the tiny capillaries nourishing the brain become restricted, the resulting reduction in blood flow can lead to silent strokes, microscopic lesions that accumulate over time and manifest as memory loss and cognitive impairment. John Kabat-Zinn's philosophy encourages an awareness of how heavy and lethargic the body feels after consuming these processed lipids, using that direct physical feedback as a guide for future choices. Consider a typical evening meal involving fast food or frozen processed dinners, which are frequent sources of these hidden fats. The meal is often consumed quickly, perhaps while distracted by television or conversation, masking the immediate physiological feedback. The individual may not notice the subtle coating in the mouth or the heavy, sluggish digestion that follows. However, biologically, the body is mounting an inflammatory response that will persist for days. By bringing attention to the texture, taste, and aftermath of such meals, the person begins to see past the convenience and marketing to the reality of what is being ingested. This awareness breaks the automatic chain of purchasing and consuming foods that are fundamentally incompatible with human biology. It is important to differentiate these harmful industrial fats from healthy, naturally occurring fats found in whole foods. The brain is primarily composed of fat and requires high-quality lipids, such as omega-3 fatty acids, to maintain its structure and function. Foods like avocados, walnuts, and fatty fish provide the raw materials for neural repair and anti-inflammatory protection. The limitation of the low-fat diet trend of previous decades was that it often led people to replace healthy fats with processed carbohydrates or trans fat-laden substitutes. The key is not the elimination of fat, but the discernment between fats that heal and fats that harden. The presence of trans fats is often disguised on ingredient labels under terms like partially hydrogenated oils, making them difficult to avoid for the unobservant shopper. This requires a level of vigilance and engagement that goes beyond passive consumption. It asks the individual to stop, read, and inquire before bringing a product into their home. This act of pausing to investigate is a form of mindfulness in action, an interruption of the rushed, habitual behavior that allows harmful substances to slip through the defenses. It transforms the grocery trip from a chore into a practice of self-care and cognitive preservation. As the intake of trans fats is reduced, the cell membranes slowly regain their fluidity and function. The brain's signaling pathways become clearer, and the risk of vascular dementia decreases. The body possesses a remarkable capacity for turnover and renewal. As new cells are formed, they are built from the materials currently available. By supplying the system with high-quality building blocks, the individual literally reconstructs their brain over time. This physical renewal supports a sharper memory and a more resilient mood, creating a positive feedback loop that reinforces healthy choices. Ultimately, the rejection of trans fats is a rejection of the artificial in favor of the real. It is a movement away from foods that are designed to last for years on a shelf and toward foods that support the life within. This shift aligns with a broader practice of mindfulness, which seeks to penetrate the surface appearance of things to understand their true nature. When the true nature of trans fats is understood, not just as bad calories, but as agents of cellular rigidity, the desire to consume them naturally fades, replaced by respect for the intricate biological machinery that supports consciousness. Where does my body feel heavy after I eat this meal? The oxidative stress of processed nitrates processed meats, often preserved with nitrates and nitrites to maintain color and prevent bacterial growth, present a distinct chemical challenge to the aging brain. Upon ingestion, these compounds can be converted into nitrosamines, potent oxidants that generate free radicals within the body. The brain is uniquely vulnerable to oxidative stress due to its high oxygen consumption and lipid-rich composition. When free radicals outnumber the body's antioxidant defenses, they attack neural cells, damaging DNA and mitochondria, the energy powerhouses of the cell. This oxidative damage is a primary driver of neurodegenerative diseases, slowly eroding the brain's functional capacity. The biological impact of nitrosamines is often exacerbated by the high sodium content typically found in cured meats. This combination creates a double hit on cerebrovascular health. The nitrates promote oxidative stress while the sodium drives up blood pressure, straining the delicate blood vessels in the brain. Over years of regular consumption, think of the daily ham sandwich or the morning bacon, this strain accumulates. John Kabat-Zinn's perspective invites the individual to look deeply at these ingrained habits. It asks for an examination of the cultural and personal attachment to these foods, recognizing that the taste is fleeting, but the chemical aftermath is long-lasting. In a practical setting, the reliance on processed meats is often driven by the need for quick, savory protein sources. A person might prepare a deli meat sandwich for lunch every day out of routine, unaware that they are consistently dosing their system with pro-inflammatory compounds. The act of preparation becomes mechanical, and the eating is done without thought. A mindful approach disrupts this routine by introducing a pause before the choice is made. It opens the space to consider alternatives, such as roasted chicken or legumes, that provide protein without the toxic preservative load. This is not about moralizing food, but about understanding cause and effect in the body. It is necessary to acknowledge that nitrates also exist in vegetables like spinach and beets, yet these foods are associated with health benefits rather than risks. The crucial distinction lies in the chemical context. In vegetables, nitrates are accompanied by vitamin C and other antioxidants that prevent their conversion into harmful nitrosamines and instead facilitate the production of nitric oxide, which supports blood flow. The danger arises specifically from the added nitrates in processed meats, which lack these protective compounds and are often cooked at high temperatures, further increasing toxicity. Understanding this nuance prevents the unnecessary avoidance of healthy, nitrate-rich vegetables. The transition away from processed meats often involves confronting deep-seated comfort food associations. Bacon, sausages, and hot dogs are frequently tied to memories of family breakfasts, summer barbecues, and ball games. Letting go of these foods can feel like letting go of a piece of one's history or identity. Mindfulness practice provides a container for these emotions, allowing the individual to honor the memory without needing to consume the food that harms them. It separates the emotional nourishment of the memory from the physical nourishment of the meal, allowing for new traditions that support longevity to be established. As the burden of oxidative stress is lifted, the brain's energy metabolism stabilizes. The mitochondria, no longer under constant assault, can produce energy more efficiently, leading to improved mental endurance and focus. The reduction in systemic inflammation also benefits the entire cardiovascular system, further securing the blood supply to cognitive centers. The individual may notice a subtle lifting of mental heaviness, a clarity that was previously obscured by the constant background noise of cellular stress. This clarity reinforces the value of the dietary change, making it self-sustaining. Choosing to eliminate processed nitrates is an act of kindness toward one's future self. It is a decision to prioritize the long-term integrity of the mind over the short-term gratification of a preserved flavor. This choice reflects a deepening awareness of the interconnectedness of all bodily systems. The stomach is not separate from the brain. What happens in the gut echoes in the mind. By treating the diet with the same attention one might give to a meditation practice, the act of eating becomes a fundamental pillar of cognitive defense and healthy aging. Why do I choose convenience over the clarity of my mind? The inflammatory fog of refined grains and final synthesis. The fourth category of dietary risk lies in the ubiquitous consumption of refined grains, such as white flour, white rice, and degermed corn products. While distinct from added sugars, these foods behave nearly identically in the bloodstream, rapidly converting to glucose and triggering the same insulin cascades that endanger neural health. The refining process strips away the bran and germ, removing the essential B vitamins and fiber that the brain needs to function and to regulate sugar absorption. A diet high in these beige carbohydrates leads to fluctuating energy levels and chronic low-grade inflammation, often manifesting as brain fog, difficulty concentrating, and eventual memory lapses. This final dietary stumbling block serves as a potent illustration of the broader disconnect between modern living and biological reality. The prevalence of refined grains is so total that they form the base of the food pyramid for many cultures: bread, pasta, pastries, and pizza crusts. To question their place in the diet is to question the very fabric of daily life. Yet, it is precisely this questioning that John Kabat-Zinn's work facilitates. By waking up to the reality of the present moment, the individual can see that normal eating is not necessarily natural or healthy eating. The observation of how one feels after a heavy pasta meal, often bloated, tired, and mentally dull, provides all the data needed to challenge the cultural norm. Synthesis of the journey requires understanding that these four food groups, sugars, trans fats, nitrates, and refined grains, share a common mechanism of harm. They generate inflammation and impair energy metabolism in the brain. They are the common enemies of longevity. However, the solution is not a rigid, fear-based restriction, which creates its own form of stress. Instead, the antidote is the cultivation of a compassionate, non-judgmental awareness. It is about shifting from a doing mode, where eating is just another task to get through, to a being mode, where the act of nourishing the body is treated with presence and respect. In the final analysis, the protection of memory is an active, daily practice. It is found in the pause before ordering a meal, in the conscious decision to read a label, and in the willingness to listen to the body's quiet signals of distress or well-being. This approach transforms the terrifying prospect of memory loss into a manageable challenge. It empowers the individual to realize that while genetics play a role, the environment we create within our own bodies is a powerful determinant of our destiny. The brain is plastic. It changes in response to how it is treated. By removing the chemical insults of these four common foods, we allow the brain's natural resilience to emerge. The path forward is one of gentle but firm intention. It involves replacing the refined with the whole, the processed with the natural, and the mindless with the mindful. It is a commitment to fall awake to the richness of life, starting with the very substance that sustains it. As the body heals from the effects of inflammatory foods, the mind clears and the memory finds a safer harbor. This is the promise of mindful eating, not just a healthier body, but a mind that remains present, vibrant, and capable of fully experiencing the later seasons of life. Who is the one making the choice to pick up the fork?